refresh. Aha. There we go.
Awesome.
Good morning, everyone.
It's so strange to have been gone for so long.
Yeah, I know. How was your holiday break?
It was okay. There were some not great things that happened, so we don't have to spend time doing it here. But the good stuff was having my family. I mean, the deep down important things, and then we just had some loss and
Hmm,
struggles that went along with it. So I'm honestly very happy that the time period is over,
right?
which is kind of sad to me. But we can't have everything go beautifully, and that makes
Mhm.
it that much more wonderful when it does.
Yeah, I think it's a great way of saying it.
How about you?
Yeah, pretty good. Same thing. I always feel like the holiday break is a nice time to rejuvenate, but then it's also, some of those times where it's harsh reminders of, kind of things that you miss or things that were, not so great, like you were saying, but, it does make the good times that much better. So,
Oh. So one thing that I saw, Michael, was a super exciting project that you and Lauren and another person just launched.
yeah, yeah, we've been working on something related to helping younger children and families with more of a ADHD type of program. So being able to, um, help out families, and there's a lot that they're working on, and so it's fun because it's part of a like multi-group kind of team. So super excited to kind of see how it all plays out, but it's stressful at the beginning, because it's kind of like whack-a-mole. You have so many different things popping up all over the place, and you're trying to just squash it, and then towards the end of it, I'm sure you've had to go through this quite a bit, and have already always just been dealing with this as an ongoing process with the virtual sand tray. But the idea that you feel like you do one thing and you're like, this is awesome, and then all of a sudden it's like, wait, but how does it look in the grand scheme of the whole thing? Did I overlap something? Did I kind of make something redundant? So it's super fun, really engaging. So excited to see how it's all going to come together.
Can you tell our listeners who maybe didn't see the announcements and whatnot, can you tell them a little bit more about what the program actually is?
Yeah, it's supposed to be a 12-week program, and it's supposed to have content designed for both the user, but also, in that case, the child, but also the parent. And so there will be separate content, and it's pretty good. It's going to have a lot of interactive activities, but a lot of educational videos, and it's all supposed to be in the form of like mobile kind of tablet, and really breaking down what ADHD is for both parents and children, and how to kind of work and understand all kinds of different things related to all kinds of different areas. So whether it's thinking, emotion, coping, structure, organization, just it's a pretty in-depth program that they've worked on, and heavily centered around Dr. Hollowell's work. So um, should be exciting to see how it all comes together. My portion of the project is working a lot on the interactive activities. Um, so
The fun
trying to,
stuff.
yeah, uh, trying to work, and it's fun because it's like you don't want to make something so interactive that you're limited by it being a tablet or things like that, and so things that normally we might be used to when it comes to PC or console. um, you don't want to make something that's too big but it's only supposed to be meant for a small amount of time, but then you don't want to make something too bland that's not very engaging.
Right. And what's the platform?
The platform is supposed to be, do you mean like what they'll be able to use it on?
Yeah.
It'll be on tablets. I believe the goal is to have it in both of the stores, so the Google Play Store and also the um,
iOS.
yeah, the iOS. So
Nice. Okay. Well,
I
very
think it's
cool. Good to see
supposed
that.
to target like ages 6 to 11. I believe is the age range that they're targeting. So
Okay. Well, it's really exciting. I hope you'll keep us all posted, uh, because I think in general, but then certainly for people who are new to this, having a little more structure and direction in how to utilize a tool can be
mm,
helpful so that people um, have something to hang their hat on, if you will, like to be able to say, okay, I do this step, then this step, and this step. I work with the parents in this way. I work with the children in this way, and however it ends up panning out with any particular family. But um, it's exciting to see this project coming to fruition.
yeah, it'll open the door, for so many other things because this is, it'll really help on a lot of things, but it is very focused on being able to help ADHD. So hopefully this just continues to provide kind of like a blueprint for other people to be able to continue to work on other things that children also experience as well. So
Right. Cool. Well, keep us posted. Let us know.
yeah, which I think was a good segue into our topic. As you were mentioning before we hopped on, that there's a big conversation that's kind of going around in the community related to safety and standards and ethics. And I know you touched on it a little bit before, but I think it's going to be an ongoing conversation that we'll be having to constantly have fluid dialogue with, but also going back and reviewing. Was this um, is this still appropriate to keep in? Do we need to change things? Because, everything is always changing so fast in our world that, never feel like nothing is ever the same anymore because it's like you start talking about like rules and regulations and it's like, well, it depends. Well, it
Well, and
depends.
it depends on a lot of things with the hardware and software. It
Mhm.
depends with a lot of things with the populations who are using it. It depends on what advancements are coming and have been made. And then it also, a big depends that I've been grappling with is with who qualifies to make those decisions.
Right.
I I sat in, and I've mentioned this before, but I sat in on a roundtable when I went to the AWE conference in November,
Mm-hmm.
and it was standing room only. Thankfully, everybody had masks on, but a little nerve wracking for me in that I haven't been that close to that many people in a long time. Luckily, I did not get sick or anything from being there. Thank you for my mask for being, and my booster and my vaccine. I mean, for being for doing their jobs. But in that roundtable, it was a lot of very rich conversation about very fundamental things, plus some others, but fundamental things as to how we decide, how we structure, how we put in place safeties because they need to be there.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, it's not clear who makes those decisions. And even if certain people, organizations, whatever, rise to the top, if you will, whatever that means in this context, to be the decision making body, what about all the it depends?
Mm-hmm.
And are they going to be able to talk about that, address that? And yet at the same time, you need a starting point.
Right.
It's kind of like the necessary evil, as I consider it, of the DSM,
Mm-hmm.
that we have all heard in one way or another, whether it's with neurodiversity or it's schizophrenia or it's whatever it is, that you've met one person with that diagnosis,
Mm-hmm.
you've met one person.
Right.
Because people can look very different. We know in the DSM, it's like 5 out of 7 in this group and 3 out of 6 in that group and whatever. And the constellation of the mixture of those diagnostic criteria can look very different and be experienced very differently by people who meet them differently. So even though we can kind of put an umbrella over it and say, oh, we're talking about this, it helps the brain to say, well, we're not talking about, I can't even think, we're not talking about, there's so much comorbidity. Every single one I'm talking has some, but to make the point, we're not talking about this, we're talking about that. And it kind of gives our diagnostic and clinician brain the ability to think in a certain direction. But that doesn't mean that we understand everything about that person and their experience based on
Right.
that diagnostic criteria. So I and then who are the ones who make those decisions? Well, personally, I've been irritated by the history of the DSM and the politics of it and the way the decisions are made and all of those kinds of things. So then it's like, how do we not recreate that in this environment?
Mm-hmm.
How do we have it be diverse enough and I almost want to say segmented, but like committees or whatnot that then come together without it being so much that it's chaos and confusion and
Mm-hmm.
nothing ever gets done. Because as we know, also, you put a bunch of therapists, and maybe they all wouldn't be therapists, but I know put a bunch of therapists in a room to try to come to a consensus, and it is very difficult. So I don't know what the answers are, but the conversations are really important.
Mm-hmm.
I put out just a little post. It's just interesting that what's going on these days. So I put out a little post on LinkedIn, and really all I said was I want to connect with other people who are passionate about virtual reality and mental health. And the whole post just exploded.
Mm.
Like, I don't even know where all these people came from. People just out of the woodwork coming and saying, me, I'm in. And then it's turned into like, we need to have a meeting and basically form an international coalition
Mm.
for VR use in mental health. And I'm like, wait a minute, what just happened? But it's great because it is what I wanted. I want to be
Mm.
connected with other people. But now it's like we have this phenomenal group of people who all want to come together. What do we do with that? It's
Mm-hmm.
kind of like the meeting that we have gone to in the summer, not through COVID, but in other years. And I've always thought we have this amazing think tank of all these fantastic professionals. What can come out of this? Like, I've always fantasized that we could write a book. A number of people have come together and written books together, but write something like specific to the people in that meeting,
Mm-hmm.
or write some papers, or come to like that there would be some product that came out of these amazing conversations we've had. And so in this coalition, I'd love to have different groups create white papers
Mm-hmm.
and really deep dive and discuss some of these issues, at least so that we can explore them further. A lot of conversation, as you know, and then I will stop talking, I promise, but a lot of conversation, about the metaverse. I mean, you and I talked about that months ago.
Mm-hmm.
And just so much, one, what is it? Is it Internet 3.0? Is it what is it? How will it actually be used? I see a whole bunch of videos of people like grocery shopping in the
Mm-hmm.
metaverse, and it's basically your avatar pushing a cart going through the store, picking like you would if you went into a regular grocery store. And it's like a lot of the feedback people were giving was, if I was going to take the time and do all that, I would just go to the grocery store. Like, what's the what? I don't need a simulation of grocery shopping. If my point is to grocery shop, if you're like in job simulator, like if they have job simulator and vacation simulator, right? If they had home simulator and you did the laundry, and which doesn't sound fun to us, but there's a game called Laundry Simulator on Roblox that kids love to play.
Mm-hmm.
So will they do their own laundry in their own house? Probably not as well, not as with as much fun, but they enjoy it. So I don't know. That could be something grocery shopping. That could be something that would be in that realm. But if you're actually trying to grocery shop, wouldn't the whole point be to have it done more efficiently?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. That's what I'm thinking. If I'm going to go into my headset and grocery shop, it's got to be something that has some other element to it that has value to me than being able to just go on my phone on an app, pick what I want, and then pull up and they put it in the back of my car.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's got to be some other element. Otherwise, why would I do it in my headset? So, how I don't know what any of this is going to look like. I think that the idea of being able to have meetings and meet up socially, business wise, the positive things that we have experienced because of Zoom and other platforms. I know Zoom's not the only one. To be able to work with our clients, to be able to have meetings. I mean, I've had meetings with people all over the world the last couple of years who I would have never been able to meet with
Mm-hmm.
otherwise. I wouldn't have had those connections. I wouldn't have been able to give trainings in Indonesia if from my home without this technology. So, and I've spoken about before that in VR, training and meeting up to me feels more real, which is weird because on Zoom or whatever, I can see the person's actual body and face, but I only see them from here up and it doesn't feel as interactive. Whereas in VR, even though it's their avatar, it feels more interactive. So that's an interesting phenomenon. But if we can meet those kinds of needs and feel more interactive in a metaverse type scenario, then great. We'll see what it looks like. But now the conversations are, what is it? What's it going to look like? What purpose would it serve? And how do we keep people safe in it? What are the standards? And then for us, a whole nother step is in a therapeutic environment
Mm-hmm.
setting, not only what all that looks like so that we can determine, just like we have with, say, playing Roblox, like don't chat in the game, do it through your telehealth platform.
Mm-hmm.
uh, how do you keep your profile secure and whatnot? Like, those are still the things that we have to address. If we are able to be a voice to inform the powers that be who are creating things within the metaverse and say, look, this could be a very powerful tool for our industry, but we need X, Y, and Z in place.
Mm-hmm.
Need to be able to know, like, basically, you know how Zoom and other platforms have a BAA, right? The Business Associate Agreement
Mm-hmm.
included, so that you can be assured in the US anyway that it's HIPAA compliant. And there are other mechanisms for that, say in the UK for GDPR. And so whatever your requirements are, that your area would include those. how how can we have sections, subsections of the metaverse and any other platform, just regular VR games, even AR, VR, MR, all of it, that will provide a BAA or
Mm-hmm.
the equivalent of, so that we know that we can utilize it in a safe way. And I'm gonna stop talking now so you can say
Oh no,
something.
you're good. Is a lot of really good information. A lot of the stuff I've thought about too. It's like going back to your grocery shopping thing that came from the CES of the conference that they had with Walmart. And so, I really thought about it too, like what's the value in it and everything like that. And I could totally see um, it's hard for us when we've been conditioned one way to kind of stop and think, okay, what is the value of this? But when I think about what is this going to look like for the future, and with augmented reality and virtual reality, a lot of companies are, I mean, there are like billions being thrown into this, like, and every company you can imagine is involved in it. You have Tencent, Alibaba, you have Microsoft, Apple, Meta, of course, Samsung, Roku. It's basically like almost every single product, it doesn't matter what type of market it is, can benefit from some sort of AR or VR application. So One of the biggest things that, there's still like Intel came out and said, for the metaverse, we still need about like 1,000 times more speed and power in chips for computing to fully have what like people are imagining. So I still think the tech is a little bit way out, but um, when you think about like why are people using it or how they're using it, specifically I can think of for like augmented reality is they're going to leverage tech to save wasting resources. And so, when I think about it, I was talking to Ashley about it, but, I think for like education reasons, eventually you'll be able to have, children put on AR headsets or glasses rather, and be able to be stimulated by digital content in which, classrooms don't have to have those physical aspects all over the place. So it's going to save time for teachers, money. You'll be able to have all of the kind of a homework and all that kind of stuff, activities is going to pop up digitally for them. And so I was like explaining to Ashley, imagine all the time and money that you have to spend, and the school spends having to go and print papers out, and all that stuff is super expensive. And so you always have like grade papers, and I was asking her, how many times do you think parents probably have questions because they can't understand like what you're saying? But imagine a parent is going to be able to put on an AR glass and say, okay, let me look at my children's, graded activities, boom. And every time a page pops up, there will be a recording. A teacher could easily say their thoughts rather than writing it down and say, hey, I saw it this way. This is what I was looking for. And just give a boom, kind of quick synopsis where a parent will be able to understand it. So they're leveraging technology to stop, using a lot of resources around the world. You think about like going to a restaurant, you have AR. Imagine like AR menus can pop up. You can press a button and here comes the menu. That way the restaurant's not having to sit there and print all these, kind of menus out and bring them out and everything. There's so many like application uses that they can use to kind of save the environment. And so, and I think of like the shopping one, it's like the ease for me would be to like pop on, click through a bunch of stuff, and from right there, okay, cool, now I can go to my next thing. And they're already working on like, self-driving, trucks that will like deliver. So, I think that like your groceries will essentially be delivered for you, but you won't have to be wasting, time driving to the grocery store and, like spending money on gas, which saves like the environment. There are so many different things that I think they're trying to leverage technology to save money, which is always going to be a business's primary objective. But I think secondary, that has a lot to do with the environment. But going back to what you were saying about like conversations and standards is just I think that you're 100% right, because there's even like subcultures within cultures of just gaming in itself. Like there are so many different cultures. There's one thing I saw that popped up, and I don't remember, it might have been like a headline or something for news, but they were talking about someone feeling that, how are people going to deal with feeling groped in the metaverse and things like that, when it comes to that type of behavior. And I could tell you through years of gaming that type of activity, and whether people say it's right or wrong or however, and I can totally see how some people would be like, oh, that's not bad, and I could see how some people could say like, no, I find that offensive, and so I totally get it. But there is a huge portion of gaming for years where you would like take someone down in a game, and then you would go over there and you would dance around their body as you took them out. And I could see how maybe someone who isn't immersed in that culture is going to be saying, feeling like that is very offensive and things like that. So those are the conversations, like you're saying, where I think there has to be like everyone from, all walks of the culture to fully understand just what is going on, or things are going to get picked apart and labeled. I mean, that's always going to happen. But like you said, with the DSM, it's like, I can't even get to tell you how many times I've had to try and fight and discuss with people when they start talking about gender identity disorder and a bunch of things like that. And it's just like, you realize the only because they're like, oh, it's a mental illness, and it's like, you realize the only reason that is actually in the DSM is because people needed to have that diagnosis to get some sort of procedure done for insurance to pay for it. So it's like, that's why they put it in there. It wasn't meant to be like, this is a mental disorder. Like there's a lot of conversations that go back and forth. that people want to pick apart and pull out, and that's where, like you said, it could be a double-edged sword.
Absolutely. And I I agree with you that having people basically from as many directions as you can find coming together to inform, because there are different things that happen within a culture that is accepted within the culture, and that doesn't mean that every single person in that culture appreciates or enjoys that thing,
Hmm.
whatever it might
Exactly.
be. So I'm not saying that, but if we think of like that normal bell curve, 68% typically is how it pans or dilutes into, that really kind of fits into like-mindedness, and then there are outliers on either end, and all of it has value. The point I'm trying to make is that there, and I just had a very important, I thought, conversation with Dr. Rachel Altvader, who we've had on the show before, and with Play Geek here, Fiona Hill, who's listening and is in our chat. We just had a really great conversation for one of her classes that Fiona teaches, that really centered around this, and an important conversation of including culture and the different aspects, and having space and understanding, and giving the attention that is due to a person's culture. So when we pull that piece in, when we're talking about something like uh, either video games or therapeutic programs, or whatever platform, whatever hardware, software, whatever it is that under the digital umbrella, that there may very well be things, and I know for a fact there are things that I don't know. I straddle, right? I think part of what I bring to this conversation is the fact that I am older. I've spent the majority of my career without using digital tools. Did my dissertation when the internet was just becoming available in on a personal level, and purchased a really old ratty computer at a yard sale, and would literally connect, and then it made the whatever that noise was. And I would go make a sandwich and come back, and it might have connected. So I am definitely in the old school category, and yet at the same time, and I wasn't brought up a digital native or a gamer. At the same time, have utilized so many more tools, hardware, and software than a lot of my same age and same point in their career colleagues. So I sort of straddle, like I'm not where you are, where I've had so much gaming experience, plus I have the clinical. So my point being that I certainly don't feel like I have a really reliable finger on the pulse of the gaming culture and what would be the norms. Therefore, I would need to consult with people who were in that in order to say, okay, well, what about this behavior or this thing that happens in gaming? Like you were saying, if somebody took someone out, what would they do after that? What might that mean? Because somebody who didn't understand the dancing around the avatar that's on the ground, they and I'm not saying that would feel good to me, because it wouldn't. It has happened to me in some, like in Fortnite and things like that. I don't like that. I'm like, screw you. That doesn't make me feel good. But understanding that it's something that is part of the culture, again, generalizing, then at least doesn't make me go to like, that's a psychopath.
Hmm.
Like, we don't want to jump to conclusions about things that we don't have adequate information or experience. And so bringing people in as consultants or as part as of the group discussing or whatever it might be allows us to understand that culture from at least a different perspective. Doesn't mean we still like it, doesn't
Right.
mean, like, I still don't like that that happens, but I understand that some people who are doing it might be doing it because that's what you do, and not necessarily because they're really sitting there, screw you, or whatever it might be. or it could be that they're doing that and you don't know. But at least in my mind, I at least have a space for it, that oh, that's a thing. Like, okay, I'm waiting for the spectator thing to be over so that I don't have to watch it anymore.
It reminds me so much because it's like you're 100% right. There's always going to be pros and cons, and there's always going to be what would be a pro in person is going to be a con digitally, and vice versa. You know, you're talking about one of the safety things that someone can do more easily in a digital environment is if they feel distressed, they can turn it off. You know, when you feel distressed in person, it's kind of hard sometimes to physically remove yourself from a situation. But on the flip side, is that could that also expose you to some even more like harsher rhetoric or behavior because people feel comfortable having more of a digital safety because they're not in front of the person. So it's kind of like what people were saying, how like sometimes you can't trust what the person is saying behind the screen, that some people will make up some whole big story on who they really are and they aren't, kind of thing. So it's definitely definitely true. But I think, like, again, that's no different than when you're talking about real, I guess, like more like physical in quote unquote real life. Like, I remember playing basketball at the gym, and I would go to like one LA Fitness near my house, play basketball there, go to another one in the city over, and the rules and how people reacted in their behavior and how they played and was completely different. And I could have, like got upset. I could have sat there and said like, no, this is ridiculous. But for me, it was like, okay, this is just a different environment. This is a different, culture here. Right. And so when you, like you're saying, when you can teach people that, like, listen, you're going within a space that has general rules and boundaries, right? You're like, obviously you talk about the outer layer, you talk about, safety. If someone comes up and they just start punching you or pushing you, like, yeah, that's I think anywhere any basketball court, that is going to be a big no right? Like, that's probably assault, or, well, it is assault, and it's against the law, right? So you're going to have these outer things, but then you're also going to have these like nuances within the culture as well. But that's no different than when you and I travel and go to Europe. There are social norms or culture or laws or different things that we have to be aware of, and if we're not and we break one of them, we can't then sit around and feign ignorance and say, well, I didn't know that was a thing. Well, so
Right.
I think that's the biggest thing that maybe people trying to understand a digital world and these conversations, like you're saying on LinkedIn, is the environment different? Yes. You're talking about a digital environment, but there is no difference in how we are interacting from a very broad and general level in a digital space than we would be in a physical space or in front of each other. Mannerisms and things like that might be different, but for the most part, it's still the big general kind of layer around it as to what are the do's and don'ts, and then there's going to be subcultures within it, just like we have in the real world. And I think that, from my own opinion and my own experience, I feel like people lose sight of that a lot, and they like think that the digital world needs to be like this perfect world. It needs to be like 100% safe, and then when it's not, it's like people jump right to it and say, see, it's bad and da da da, but like they'll neglect all the terrible stuff that happens every single day outside of a digital world. um
At the end of
so
the day, it's still humans in there. It's humans creating it. It's humans interacting in it. We are humans, and so whatever that perfection is unrealistic.
mhm,
And
exactly.
we're all going to be different, and some of those differences, like you said, there's a base layer of what is acceptable and what is not, and then there are all these variations. I had a really interesting conversation on Thursday, no, Friday. Yes, Friday. As I say, pretty much every time we meet, like, time is pretty messed up for me still. I don't even know why that is, but it is. Maybe because I work 7 days a week. That's probably my problem. So it all blends together. But the 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 idea of real. So, like you just said, the real world. I have had so many thoughts and internal conversations, and then external conversations about like the concept of real friends.
Mm-hmm.
How many times have we had parents, collateral contacts, whoever we're talking with, talk about people that you know online, like aren't your real friends.
Mm-hmm.
So do you know them in person or do you know them online? Oh, well, you know, who are your real friends? I don't even know what that means. I can tell you that I have friends right now who are more real to me in terms of connection and understanding and knowing and checking in and everything. And they are people I know online
Mm-hmm.
than the people who I know in quote real life who don't connect in that way. Yet I could physically be in the same space with them if I manage to coordinate it, right? So then I know this is existential and we're probably not going to get very far in the conversation, but I just want to because I don't think there's any grand conclusion. But just that concept of real, I think, is very interesting too. One of the things about immersive technology is it tells your whole body and your mind that you are in that environment.
Mm-hmm.
I teach a class that I've mentioned before, the 10-week series in VR, use in play therapy, and I watch. So we have all these resources, and we read and we come together and we talk about them, and then we use particular programs, and then we come back together and talk about it. So I'm in Zoom, and I can see them in their windows, you know, using the VR, and it's happened every single cohort at least a couple of times that you'll see somebody in a program, and it seems to happen in Vader Immortal a lot, where people will like go to lean on a table or something, or like one person went to go put their controllers down on the counter and
Yeah.
there's no counter there, no physical construct of a counter that is solid matter that they can put something on and it'll stay there, but your body and your mind believes that it's there. So you go to lean on it, or you go to sit on it, or you go to put stuff on it. So doesn't that come make the concept of real come into question when we're saying an online connection like isn't real because we're not in the same physical space, that your mind and your body isn't interacting with the other people, with the items that are in play or in front of you, because they don't have solid matter? Like, I'm not saying I have the answer to this because it's convoluted, and that's why I said it's existential and we're not going to get to a grand conclusion, but I don't think it's as, pun intended, solid as a construct as we wish it were.
Right. No, I agree with you. I mean, I think personally, and going to the existential part of it is like the connections that we have with things that are, whether it's physical in front of us or things that have, like when you're talking about like spirituality, right? I mean, you're talking about religion, right? Like there are a lot of ways in which people speak, spiritually with, what they believe in. That physical presence in front of you, whether people believe is there or not, right, is up for debate. You can talk about how when you're younger, people have connections with various different objects, teddy bears, stuffed animals. So for me, like I don't buy into the notion. I think that when people are trying to put some sort of bad connotation behind connections over the internet or some sort of digital world in which they don't or they haven't met the person physically in front of them, is more of a idea that had been created around the internet altogether. The whole stranger danger thing, and people on the internet are bad and things like that. And I'm not saying that everyone is great, but just like in real life, not everyone is great. There are bad people, I keep using the word real life, but I mean like in a physical presence. there are terrible people, and so I think that the agenda behind the idea that the internet is bad, people that you meet on the internet is bad, a is more rooted there. I guess I could say one of the more easier ones would be like talk about dating. They always say like, oh, online dating is very, scary because you don't know who you are, or who you're meeting, and are they telling the truth and all that. Yeah, you're absolutely right. You know how many stories I've read of people saying that they've married people and had no idea that they had been married before, that they are still married. That, you know what I mean? Like that you truly don't know the people, whether it's physically in front of you or digitally. And it's so for me, it's like you can't control that. You can't control the other person's behavior. You can control your own safety. You can control your own reactions to it, your own understanding to it. And is it any harm of me coming on here and saying like I'm this millionaire and I can be giving you all this, you're explaining your life to me, but for you it's serving a purpose. I'm not selling you anything, I'm not telling you to go and do anything, but here I am just existing. Is that hurting you, whether I am telling you something that could be a fallacy or not? I don't know. I mean, I think that's up to the interpretation of the person. So when you go back to the idea of like, are people, connections in real, I think it very well comes down to what are you experiencing with that purpose that's serving a need, and is that safe, is that harmful, just like it would be if you met a stranger in person.
Right. And back that goes back to this idea that it has to be quote perfect, whatever that even means, and and that isn't realistic. It's not realistic in the physical presence of another person, like solid matter, physical presence. What the hell are we going to call these things? We can come up with some terms. But if I'm in the same physical space with them in solid matter, I don't know how else to say it, or not. But none, we don't have any way to know whatever is being presented is actual. And so that I totally agree with that, and it gets very amorphous very quickly. um and I think what we try to do as humans, like if you think of people who are going on diets, that they're like, a lot of the gray area is hard for people to follow through with. So they might go to, I'm cutting out all carbs,
Mm-hmm.
I'm cutting out all sugar, I'm cutting out whatever. And that sounds like hell to me personally, because I love carbs and sugar. um, I love them more than I should. And so that's a whole nother conversation. But the point is that that's part of human nature, is that we go to these extremes because it
Mm-hmm.
gives us some sense of security and control over a situation. Like, I know that it's going to be hard, but if I said I'm going to cut out sugar, then I know what to look for, I know what to avoid as best. Like, it's hidden in all sorts of things like spaghetti sauce, like it's everywhere. But that you still at least know, when I'm looking at a table of contents, list of ingredients is what I meant. When I'm looking at the list of ingredients, I'm looking for something particular that I've already identified, that then I can say, oh, it has that. Nope. And it gives me criteria and parameters. And we
Mm-hmm.
as human beings want those criteria and parameters, whether we're going to stay within the bounds of them, or we're just going to stand right on top of them and sort of tease that, we don't know which way we're going to go, or we're going to go against, we're going to go for, with, whatever, or we're going to break them and we're going to go outside of them. But the fact that the parameters were known means we know where we are interacting or not, or whatever it is. And so if we say all things on the online, on the internet, are bad, then that gives us a sense of control about that.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a false sense of control, and it's unrealistic. And so, full circle, everything we're talking about today is interwoven for sure. Full circle back to, it's not going to be utopia. It's
Right.
going to be other ways to connect, other ways to get things done, like this coalition thing that is forming. When we all get together, that's not a meeting that would be very easy. I would say it would be impossible at this point with so many people in different countries and people. It's hard enough with the time zones. Never mind. Imagine if we're all trying to meet in person. Like,
Right.
it just wouldn't happen. And so I think it's part of it is what are the things that couldn't, wouldn't, or would be very difficult to happen that can now happen in these new environments slash not so new environments, and what are things that might be enhanced, what are things that have value in both the traditional and the more technological, and then what are things that are better in the traditional.
Mm-hmm.
Like I personally, I have, and I've talked about this before, I have an old school planner. It's paper. And people laugh at me all the time because they're like, "You're the tech person using a paper planner." I like it. I like
Mm-hmm.
opening it up. I like physically opening it up and looking at my week or my month or whatever it might be that particular day. I also like the fact that because of my electronic health records type platform, that my work schedule is online and protected, within their HIPAA compliancy and all that kind of stuff. But if I'm in the grocery store and I sit there and go, oh, I don't know if I can do that thing because I can't remember my work schedule, I can pull it up on my
Mm-hmm.
phone right then and there, which is so helpful for me because I'm ADHD enough that by the time I leave the grocery store, I don't even know what I was supposed to be looking at anymore. So for me to be able to do it right then and there means that I am more productive. The flip side of that is it also means that on my free time, I'm doing and thinking about work, which, is a boundary thing that I need to work through and all of that. But it's not the technology's fault. It's me because I'm doing it in the moment, but I'm doing it in the moment because if I don't, I'm going to forget. And I want to be a responsible professional. So we have to, each of us individually, figure out what that means for us. But there are things that we might do better in the traditional, things that might do better in hybrid, and things that might do better in technological world of some sort. And so to all or nothing it is really a huge loss. And what I have seen, and I'm interested in your thoughts, Michael, is what I've seen is one of the things in the pandemic has been that a lot of people have been forced out of the idea of the all or nothing because we've had to use these different mediums. And there have been people who were absolutely against any of these mediums now saying, oh, wait, you can have a connection.
Mm-hmm.
You can have progress. And maybe it's not the end all be all for that person, but just the idea that it opened up for them is huge. So I don't know where it'll land, but I hope it lands in what I just said about some things are best in traditional for certain situations, certain people, certain arenas. Some are best in hybrid and some are best in technology.
Yeah, it's like you know, it's fascinating because like we always preach that we don't want to be on any extremes because it's not healthy. We always say to keep an open mind, be kind and respectful to others, who might have a different opinion. But a lot of that doesn't happen, right? And so, it's fascinating because I agree with you. And it just reminded me of like this thing that I saw for VR recently, and this 48-year-old woman who's in a VR headset, and so she's in VR chat and she's on her digital avatar, and she says, I didn't know what this it's cute because she calls it Oculus instead of like VR. She's like, I didn't know what this Oculus thing was, but as a 48-year-old disabled woman, I've lost my ability to really go outside and interact with people and just do what I once was able to do. And she said, so I asked my son to get me this Oculus thing, and it really has been, the most beautiful thing for me because I'm able to walk around, interact. My disability in a physical space does not limit me in a digital space, essentially, is what she's saying. And the happiness that you can hear in her voice as she's saying it, is it's fantastic. And you can really apply that. Doesn't mean just it's not related to just disability, disabled people as well. It's like people's opinions about Facebook and Mark Zuckerberg and everything, but the core thesis behind what he wants to create, and the whole metaverse isn't just Facebook, right? I mean, you got to think of like metaverse as it's going to be like the internet. There are going to be like millions of different
Right.
metaverses.
There's so many
um,
out there already. I mean, Meta might just be the one we've heard of more because it's Facebook and because they changed
right.
their name, right? And then it's like, wait a minute, it's Meta now? Like, why? And then that opens up into either a search or an exploration of what that even is. But by no means is that the only game in town for sure.
Yeah, his whole like core creation behind what he wants to do is, he remembers growing up, and I mentioned this before, but the only thing in the town that he was able to do was sports, and he was not a sports person. He said, I felt like I was more of a geek person. I wanted to learn to code and things like that, but I only had one friend in the town that was interested in something like that. So he's like, luckily that's good. But he's like, how many people around the world don't feel like they fit in their physical environment, or they're limited in some way, whether it be access to resources, maybe it's personal, financial, family hardships, whatever it may be. And so he wants to create this world in which people are able to connect socially and find people with similar interests and everything. And I think that, like it goes back to what you were saying, like the idea that you can connect with someone across the world in a pandemic and have a very real connection is the core thesis behind what he wants to create in just a more immersive way, than like Zoom would be, so to speak. So
I
I'm
just
all for it.
I just want to say that doesn't mean that Mark Zuckerberg is like this altruistic.
No, not at all.
So there are definitely a lot of offshoots of that conversation, but as a fundamental concept, and I would like to think and believe that it is genuinely where he started with all of this.
Hmm.
That is an amazing uh, goal and concept from which to grow. And if we can strip away all of the other stuff and thoughts and things that have happened and data breaches and algorithms and all that kind of stuff, and just really stay true to that, separate of Facebook or Meta or any of it, really just think, how is it, what is it about connection that is important, and what are the components that go into the idea of connection. And I'm actually, I know this is going to be a really big shock to probably you and Play Geek, but I really have gone into quite a deep dive of what that means, and historically and currently and everything, trying my hardest to define what those, at least some anchor points in the concept of connection really are, because those are the things, just like we say, like, what are the therapeutic anchors and components that we can then translate into a new medium, which would be digital play therapy, or any other, but in our case we're talking about digital play therapy. We also are saying, what are the key components and anchors that have to do with things like reality, have to do with connection, and how do we take those key components and translate those into new mediums. And maybe it looks a little bit different on the outer shell than the traditional, but on the inner process, it's the same stuff. It's, we were talking in the recording we did for Fiona's class last night about just human characteristics and tendencies and needs, and how why is it that even things like fairy tales and folk tales have been passed on in one iteration or another through generations upon generations upon generations? It's because they speak to the human condition and experience, and that those fundamentals may have tweaks and little changes here and there, but for the most part stay consistent. And so if we can identify what those components are, the internal process, the internal connection or sense of reality and things like that, they can stay stable and constant while the medium and the environment might change, and we can still feel fulfilled.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I'm very existential today, apparently.
No, I agree. I mean, I like it. I think that, it all comes down to, I know we're low on time, but, I think it comes down to the idea that there are going to be very general rules and understandings that we want people to abide by, but there also is something very beautiful about the idea of having an open, kind of peer-to-peer or peer-to-peer discussion on rules and, standards. And I would probably say that, like, typically everyone, when you're talking about in a physical, kind of environment and interaction, I would probably say more often than not, people don't stop and say, like, oh, what did that mean to you? Or we didn't have conversations when people felt like their feelings, or, someone didn't like the way that something went down. It just kind of like, oh, we're just going to move along with it. But I do think that, like, in a digital world, what in the context of what we're talking about, if there is a structured way to really help, from a social aspect, is to implement more of that. It's kind of fascinating because for me personally, I feel like what an idea of a metaverse and a digital world is it's kind of like being able to take all of the mistakes or things that, we see value that didn't happen in more of a traditional aspect, whether, it was just resources or understanding or knowledge, not knocking on anything that came before, because that's the point of society. We always evolve. We always learn from the past, or at least we hope to, and don't make the same mistakes. And so I feel like, the digital aspect will be a way to reinvent or help be another tool to connect more people, or to help install more visual and immersive messages than we have had traditionally.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I wish we had more hours right now to talk about this.
Next week.
Right? To be continued.
Right.
I love our conversations. I'm so glad we're back to it.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited. I was bummed out that we didn't get to do it last Sunday, so definitely excited that we're back to normal, and I'm glad that you were feeling well enough as well today to be able to meet. So I was excited about that.
Same. And just to put a little bug out there in your ear, Michael, and then to listeners, we are theoretically going to be in the same physical space.
Yeah.
As solid matter in February. And while my very busy agenda for a very short amount of time, so I come in on a Friday, I teach all day Saturday, and then I leave Sunday morning super crazy early. And you, as a crazy person, have offered to take me to the airport super crazy early. I appreciate that. But I was wondering if maybe we might want to do a special episode.
Yeah.
That Saturday. Maybe we could do it in the evening.
Yep. Yeah, we could do that.
And in the same physical space with solid matter next to each other. Like, that would be amazing and fun. And the fact that I'll be traveling on Sunday, so I wouldn't be able to do the stream on that Sunday anyway. So just a little bug in your ear. Maybe we can make that happen. Mm-hmm. And that would be another layer. Now, the funny thing is we'd probably still have to be on two different computers and still be on Zoom so that we could show up correctly on the Twitch stream, which would be funny that we still had to do that. But I could reach over and like poke you.
Yeah, we could do that. Or, I mean, the space that I have is big enough. I mean, Ashley and I used to do streams together where both of us were sitting on the screen playing games. So
okay, all right, well, we will definitely figure it out. And I am going to get my COVID test before I come and everything. So I will be as safe, and I'm vaccinated and boosted, and I will be as safe as I possibly can to be in the same physical space, solid matter, as you.
Yeah, I'm
So
excited for you to be able to meet the fur babies. So
yes, absolutely. Seeing you is okay, but the fur babies, not
that's right.
so
Don't worry, I don't take any offense.
okay, well, we can talk about that more, but I'm psyched that that might be something you'd want to
Yeah.
do, and hopefully our listeners would get a kick out of it as well.
All right. Have a good one, everyone, and we'll catch you guys next Sunday.
Bye.
Bye.